What's up, guys? I wanted to make a quick video about a recent experience I had solving a problem that was given to me as part of an interview or part of an assessment as part of an interview process. Failed might be a little bit harsh of a word to use to describe how I performed. I didn't really fail, I just didn't get to a complete solution to the problem. And so I thought I would share with you guys the problem, kind of how I went about solving it, where I got stuck, and if I had been given more time, what I would do differently to actually get it completely solved. And I just want to share this because I think it's probably an experience if you're a younger dev or a newer dev, or maybe even an experienced dev. It might just be helpful to kind of hear somebody else's experience in the interview process. So I hope you find this useful and helpful. So the problem that I was given was basically that I have a function called scheduled payments, and scheduled payments takes in an order amount. And my job, or the scheduled payments job, is to basically say, given this order amount, break it down into 4 different installments like this, with each installment being 14 days apart. So the first installment is the current date, or whenever this payment function is called. And then each date after that is 14 days into the future. And then that's it. So I kind of have a little test bed set up for us here where I'm calling the function with an order amount of 100. It's a nice round number, kind of easy to use for test purposes. And then I'm just printing the result over here using node watch so that we can kind of see as I make changes how that looks, or if I'm actually moving in the right direction. So the first thing I did actually, when they presented this problem to me, the first thing I did was ask if it's okay to change the signature of the scheduled payments method. And the reason why I wanted to change the signature of the scheduled payments method is because I want to be able to make this function somewhat reusable, and most importantly, I want to make it more testable. So if within the scheduled payments method, I'm always getting the current date like this, if I always get today equals new date, this method or this function becomes a little bit more difficult to test, because as the caller, I can't control what the today value is going to be. So the first thing I did was ask, well, can I change the signature of the function? Which they were like, yeah, that's totally cool. So what I did was I went ahead and changed the signature of the function so that it takes in the start date. So I changed it so now I can say start date equals a date. And I think if I could go back, I also would have just made this optional, right? Because if this is an existing function that's already being used in the code base today, I don't want to break somebody. So if this was the case, I'd probably make this optional and just set it to the current date value. And this way now, for testing purposes, now like down here below where I have this expected result and I'm expecting today's date to be May 29th, I can actually mock or fake that date if I need to. So I can say const date equals a new date, and we can set that date to 2025 and then May 29th. And now I can pass that in to my scheduled function or scheduled payments function. And now I have control over what the start date is for these installment payments. Okay, so then the next thing I did was I started to define a results variable. So they've given me an interface to work with. So this is the shape of the data that they expect scheduled payments to return. So I went ahead and just defined a results object like this and typed it to be an array of installments. Now, the fact that I don't think this is really necessary. This was something that the interviewer was asking questions, kind of leading me to do. But the fact that they've already typed the return type of the scheduled payments function, typing this results variable seems kind of unnecessary to me. Because if this results object doesn't conform to the installments return type, I'm going to have issues. But that's what I did in the interview. Now, once I had the results defined, I went ahead and started thinking about my loop. So I'm going to have to build up this array by doing some type of iteration. So I just went with the old classic for loop. So I just said for let I equal 0, we will say while I is less than the number of installments, and then we will increment I on each iteration. And then in here, we're going to do something. We're going to push something onto this results array. In this case, I just pushed an empty object because I just want to make sure I don't have any off by 1 errors. Now, this isn't going to work because obviously number of installments doesn't exist. Now, that was part of the constraints they gave me. They said number of installments needs to be 4. However, again, in terms of making this method testable and reusable, this should probably also be an optional parameter that the caller can pass in. So we can say number of installments equals 4 by default. But if you wanted to do something different, you could. And now if I print out my results, you'll see I don't have any off by 1 errors. I'm getting 4 objects, which is what I would expect. So that's good. So from here now I can kind of focus, or I started to focus on actually populating this results object properly. So the first thing I need to do is I need to calculate the installment amount, and the installment amount needs to be whatever the order amount is divided by the number of installments. So that's going to be constant. So I can do that up here at the very top outside of my loop, and I can say installment amount is going to be equal to the order amount divided by the number of installments. And then here I can just say push installment amount, and because I'm using the same name for my variable as the property key here, I can just use this kind of shorthand to say installment amount, and now we can see we're getting our installment amount correctly. And this is the point where now I started to get stuck when I was solving this in an interview, because now we have to start dealing with the fact that we need to calculate a date, and particularly we need to calculate a future date. And so I started to really get hung up on how do I deal with all the edge cases there, leap years, what happens if the next 14 days pushes me into a new month, or what happens if the next 14 days pushes me into the next year. But I knew that JavaScript provides a set date API, right? So if you have a data object, you can call set date to change the date value of that date object. And I was pretty certain that that API took care of all those edge cases, but I couldn't really remember. And so I sort of got stuck. And if I could go back now, I would have just been more confident and done what I thought was correct. But in a real life scenario, if I was working on this problem outside of an interview setting, I would have just went to the MDM docs and I would have just pulled up the set date API and verified my understanding. My understanding is correct. So the set date method does mutate the existing date object that you're calling it on, but it does handle the fact that if if you specify a number outside the expected range, the date information will be advanced. What that means is if the date object has the month of May and you give it a number of set date to 40, it will automatically take care of rolling that date value from May to June, which is what I need. So this is sort of where in the interview I got stuck. They started asking some questions, I got distracted, and I never actually got this to a complete solution. But if I was going to get this to a complete solution, this is how I would have done it. In hindsight, obviously hindsight's 2020, and maybe you're thinking this problem should have been solved in a minute, and it took me way too long. But I wanted to make sure when I was solving it that I was kind of demonstrating the fact that I was giving consideration to edge cases, that I was thinking about testability, that I was thinking about reusability, and I'm hoping that that was taken all as a plus and not that it was a complete fail because I didn't complete the assignment or didn't complete the problem all the way. All right, so what I would do here is inside my loop is to actually calculate this date is I would say, okay, const payment date is going to be equal to a new data object, and that new data object is always going to start at the start date, right? So I can say new date takes in the existing start date object. And the reason why I want to create a new date is because when I call set date on this payment date, payment date dot set date like this. Did I spell that wrong? Yeah, payment date like that. Did I still spell that wrong? Payment date. Dot set date. There we go. Set date. When I call set date on this, it's going to mutate this set date, this payment date object. And so if I was to call set date on the start date inside this loop, since the start date is being passed in from the outside, I'd be mutating this date value within my function. I don't want to do that. So that's why I'm creating a new data object. And this would be a good thing to talk about in the interview to kind of explain, because that helps them understand that you understand things like pass by value, pass by reference. You understand the benefits of mutability versus immutability, and that you take that into consideration when you're writing your code. And so inside set date, I need to set the date to a value X number of days into the future. And the constraint that they gave me was it needed to be 14 days into the future. So I could hard code this up above, but again, in the interest of making things reusable and testable, let's just have that be passed in as an optional value. And we'll say days between installments like this. And to begin with, it'll be 14 by default, but if a caller wants to change it, they can change it. And so now what we'll do is we'll say const days in the future is going to be equal to I, which is the current iteration that we're on of this loop, times the days between installments. So the first iteration is going to be 0, which means our payment date is just going to be the current date. And then on each further iteration, it'll advance it 14 days. So we'll say days into the future, like that. Now the problem here is days into the future is not going to work the way you think it's going to work, right? Because days into the future here, if this is 0 and this start date is in May, then the date value I just set this to is May the 1st. This number, in order to get that behavior of it automatically advancing to the next month or the next year, we have to pass in a number to set date that's greater than the expected range, right? So if there's 30 days in the month, we need to pass in more than 30. If there's 31 days in the month, we need to pass in more than, you kind of get my drift here. So what we need to do is we actually need to make sure that we're always offsetting this by whatever the start date's date value is. So we'll say start date dot get date like this plus days into the future. And now we can actually just come down here and say, or we'll say date is going to be equal to payment date, and then we'll just turn this to an ISO string so we can see it a little bit easier in the console. So if we come over here and look now, we can see we're actually getting the correct date values that we would expect based on our test case over here, right? So we're getting May the 29th, June the 12th, June the 26th, and then July 10th. And we're not having to handle any of those edge cases of, oh, is it leap year? Is it the end of the month? Is it the end of the year, beginning of the year, all that stuff. We're just relying on the implementation of the language to take care of it for us. And that's probably the best way to approach this, right? Or otherwise, go get a library to do it for you. Now you'll notice my tests are still failing because I do need the dates in this string format. So the way I'm going to do this, and obviously there's probably this is a little hacky, there's probably a better way to go about doing this, but if I'm just trying to solve the problem, I probably am just going to say split on T and then grab the first index like that, and now we're passing because now we're getting that properly formatted date string. So this is how I would have gone about solving it. This is kind of how I would have gotten to a complete solution. I think I did well though in the interview talking this through like I did for you now. And I think it's just the importance of highlighting that while you may not always get to a complete solution, it helps to just talk through the things you're struggling with. When you do get stuck, just voice that. I'm stuck because I'm thinking about X, Y, and Z, and I'm not really sure about how this API works. If I was doing this outside of this interview, I would just go look up that API's documentation to confirm my understanding. And so it doesn't always have to be, just because you quote unquote fail doesn't mean it has to be a true failure, right? You can still demonstrate that you have knowledge and expertise, but not necessarily get it completely done. Obviously, I know there's some people that are probably going to roast me in the comments who are going to say, man, I could have done that in 3 minutes, and I wouldn't hire you if you couldn't do it in 3 minutes. But I thought I would just share, because I think it's helpful to hear about other people's experiences, how they approach those experiences, how they deal with failures and successes, and how they learn from them. So my takeaways from this experience was, one, it's good to talk through your thought process. It's good to talk through both things that you know, things that you don't know, and stay positive, right? Don't get defeated. Don't go silent. Keep talking. And then after the interview, sit down and actually think about, okay, if I had been given a little bit more time, or I could have focused a little bit more, what would have the complete solution been? And so that's what I'm sharing with you guys all today. I hope you found it helpful. I hope maybe this encourages you, if you've had a similar experience, or maybe are preparing to have an experience like this, that it encourages you to stay relaxed, stay calm, show them what you know, be honest about what you don't know, and learn from it. All right. Well, if there's anything you guys think I could do better, or think that I completely screwed up, obviously drop a comment. Let me know. I'm learning just like all of you. And otherwise, I'll see you guys in a stream or another video, or in the comments of the video. Yeah. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.